Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the music education department at Berkeley College of Music. And I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is Briana Raucci. Briana is a Connecticut-based artist specializing in film and digital photography, writing, and design. Briana also happens to have multiple disabilities. Over the years, Briana has self-described as a photographer, photojournalist, writer, graphic designer, UX and product designer, social media manager, artist, etc., but feels none of these titles fully embodies the creativity she is constantly trying to express in new ways. After in-depth creative exploration, doing both full-time and freelance work for over 13 years, Briana is now freelancing full-time, utilizing all of her creative abilities. Being a multi-passionate individual, this has allowed her to balance all of her creative endeavors and to add a few more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm your guest host, Briana Raucci, a disabled artist, writer, and designer living with cerebral palsy, epilepsy, endometriosis, ADHD, and more. Through my disability and art blog, I attempt to transcend ability and demonstrate my personal experience. Today, I'm joined by Ash Marnich, the freelance artist and illustrator behind Ash M Creations. Based in Duluth, Minnesota, Ash's work combines ink, graphite, watercolor, and mixed media to explore deeply personal and symbolic themes, often merging human anatomy, natural elements, and surreal textures into emotional and evocative compositions. Ash has been featured in multiple exhibitions and sells her art both online and in select stores. Through her personal work as well as commissions, which span from books to custom artwork and posters for comedians, she has an active online presence and demonstrates her unique perspective and artistic skills, blending them with her great sense of humor. Ash lives with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or HEDS, a connective tissue disorder that affects her joints and mobility. This is our first time actually chatting versus texting, but I think it's safe to say that we pretty instantly became friends once I saw her artwork for a comedian, Mike Cannon. And we started talking about our disabilities and how we use comedy to get through chronic pain and everything. So needless to say, I'm very excited to finally talk to you.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too. It's fantastic. And yeah, it's so cool how we kind of connected. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So can you tell us about your artistic journey? How did you get into art and find your visual voice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say the cliche thing that I think every person in the art says is like, oh, I've been drawing since I can remember and blah, 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 blah. So I'm gonna say it. I've been drawing since I can remember. I've tried to search back for, a different answer. And I mean, my mom told me, and I think she even had a picture of it once, where I fell asleep with a color crayon in my hand, as a toddler, because I was always drawing. And so that, I mean, my entire life, I've always been creative, and that was kind of my journey. I don't remember anything else. I just kind of knew from day one what I wanted to do. It fluctuated. You know how little kids are always like, sometimes they'll be like, I want to be a veterinarian or blah, 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 blah. That might come up here or there, but it was always something that I wanted to pursue. And due to illness, I ended up having to leave high school and then just test out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a whole ordeal. It was one of those things where many months of being told that I was faking to get out of school, and pretty soon during a meeting with the principal, assistant principal, and my mom and I, it was just suggested that I just test out, which I'm actually now looking back very thankful for, because it actually made me work harder. in the
Yeah.
long run than I would have had I graduated. Honestly, I had to study on my own and I learned my own resilience through that. And then a few years after that, I kind of floundered. I had actually thought about becoming a physical therapist assistant.
Wow.
Yeah, and that and that's where I think my very first interest in the human form and how the body works came to be. And then but I still wanted to go back to art. And I knew that that was what I really wanted to do. And just to double check, I took some classes at a local community college and took aside by an instructor, and he told me that I needed to go and pursue art full time. And I did that. I got accepted on a scholarship to the Detroit College for Creative Studies. It was actually funded by the Ford family. And at that time, it was not like you had to, it was a private college. So you had to be accepted in. It had this whole process. They've expanded since and whatnot. And I started out there with a concentration on entertainment illustration.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. For the first 2 years, I would say, took storyboarding classes. It was kind of cool because we had people from like the industry come in and speak and guest instruct. And I had the privilege of meeting Sid Mead twice, shaking
Wow.
his hand. And to this day, it was phenomenal. I will say, he was, I think, in his 80s at the time. Softest hands in an individual I've ever felt in my life. Like
Incredible.
yeah, that sticks with me, and very, very cool. But it became very clear that the competitiveness in that field was extreme.
Mm.
And the school I went to was very, very, the dropout rate due to pressure and stress within the first semester of the freshman year, it was on the top. Like, yeah, it was a very demanding school. And I realized that I enjoyed the entertainment industry, but it just wasn't my jam.
Hmm.
And after taking a required anatomy course and excelling at that, I mean, it was a great course. I was one of a few students that was granted the access to actually attend a real life autopsy
Wow.
because of like the skills. And so then I realized that entertainment wasn't for me and then just going into what was considered editorial illustration, and I've kind of balanced since then between the realm of commercial illustration and fine arts.
Hmm.
And when I graduated with my bachelor's in fine arts, I graduated with honors and then also was one of two students given the green light to go on to med school
Wow.
in anatomy illustrator. I did one diagram of the human eyeball. And it was so taxing because when you're doing that kind of illustration, you have to have everything correct. And I realized I just want to be creative with it, dude. And
Yeah.
so, I'm like, and also after completing that school, I'm like going on to med school. I just don't want to pay for that. And yeah, so I've just been working freelance on and off since then. And I really, the past, I'd say year and a half, I've really just kind of pursued it even more.
Well,
Before I didn't take it seriously. I kind of, but yeah, I've really started branching out and really pursued what I want to, which is everything. And I thought until recently that I had to stay in one lane. But yeah.
yeah, absolutely. What an incredible journey. That took a bunch of twists and turns that I didn't
Yeah, I'm
expect. That's
sorry. I'm like
amazing.
hearing myself going, how do I like recap all of this? Because
No,
it is crazy.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And you answered like all my questions about your journey already. So that's amazing because it's just so interesting because I was gonna ask how you ended up incorporating, anatomy, nature, all these different things into one thing, and it's all a part of your journey. And it's so crazy how ableist they were in high school that you ended up, they didn't even believe you, and then you ended up graduating with a degree with honors and all of that later on. So absolutely incredible. Um,
Yeah.
for listeners who might not know, can you briefly describe your condition and how it affects your daily life?
Yeah. It is a crazy, crazy condition. And when I say that, I mean that with the sense of it's different for everybody. And I'm still understanding it and actually accepting it. I was actually having a discussion this morning with my boyfriend about how if I was on the outside and somebody was trying to explain this to me, I would just start to think that it was this person is making this up because it is such a broad, I guess I keep hearing people refer to it as an umbrella because the people under it, everybody's situation is different. For me specifically, I've always had what I was called, what growing up, it was you're triple jointed. As I've
Mm.
learned, that's not a thing. But it was this thing where bending, like I can bend my thumb back to touch my forearm without problems. My ankles can go completely, I could walk on the side of my ankles and nothing happens. I just always thought my entire life that that's how things were, how everybody was. And I also thought everybody felt uncomfortable and felt a sense of discomfort and at times pain in their body. And so that's how it affects me. I know that it affects people differently. There's various types of EDS. It will affect people's organs. It affects their hearts. It basically affects their skin, anything that's a connective tissue. And in my case, it's a form where it affects my joints, but it also affects my muscles. My muscles get tense and they seize up, but my joints are extra flexible. So I'm pulling things out of joint just by functioning, just by being on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Um,
How does
yeah,
how does that affect your ability to make art physically, like drawing and painting and packaging and selling prints? Like how does that affect you on the day to day?
on the day to day, it affects me because I could, if I want to sit down and work on a piece, I'm like, yeah, I'm engaged in this. I want to work on it. My body sometimes will say, hey, we're only going to let you work on this for 10 minutes, and then we're going to start sending fire up your spine. It's oh hey, you bent down to get that print. Guess what? Your hip is out of joint now. Your pelvis is off, and you are going to have a problem. Or my body will sometimes just be like, yeah, we're not bending down today. You know, it's
Yeah.
it is so it's kind of like I've had to come to terms with the fact that the feeling of like I sometimes I don't get to decide, but I take advantage of when things are, and very thankful for when things are working, and asking for assistance and being more vocal with people and clients, which I've just recently become comfortable in doing and saying, hey, just to let you know, I struggle with these physical issues. There are some days that I just can't work because my hand will cramp up. And if I try to push through it, it will delay the project. So, this project might, take, what is our window? What is the room that we can work in? So, yeah, that's pretty much how it affects me is, you know, frequent breaks,
Yeah.
shorter work periods, changing from sitting and working at a piece to standing and working on a piece to all of that, and asking for assistance when I can get it.
Well, good for you for starting to speak up and tell your clients and everything. And knowing, I talk about this often, but to work, and we've talked about this often, but
Mhm.
working with your body versus against it. And it is frustrating when your body doesn't want to cooperate and we have like the mental capacity to do the work, but our body's like, no, not right now. It gets very frustrating, but it's good that you've learned to like embrace it and kind of go with it as frustrating as it can be.
It is frustrating, and again, I'm still learning it. I actually, for the last year, I've been working with a hypnotist who has helped me tremendously in. She's also a brain rewiring expert and performance coach. So she's helped me tremendously with understanding that and living with the illness instead of being having the illness modify my life, if that makes sense. And I'm again just learning that. But it's one of those weird things is where sometimes people really want to help more than you think,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's amazing. So, in terms of here, let me see. Have you had to adapt your tools, workspace, or creative process because of this? Like, do you actually have any adaptation tools for drawing and for these processes?
Yeah, I have multiple cushions, back support, various. I mean, I have a stim unit that I'll
Mm.
put on if need be. Shoes that are for just inside the house that have special inserts for when I'm feeling a bit off and like I just don't have like that dexterity in my feet. Yeah, and then even just various ways that I can set a drawing board at various angles. Even that can help because I won't even realize that I've been leaning down at such a way that oh yeah, like I'm not aware of this, but my shoulder has been like weirdly twisted and out of joint, and that's not, and again, because my body doesn't send me messages to let me know all the time that something is, it's one of those things where like my body doesn't always send me the messages it's supposed to. That's another part of it is it I'm not aware that I shouldn't be keeping my shoulder at such a way that where the average person, they'd be like, oh my gosh, my collarbone feels like it's going to snap in half. Whereas my collarbone just goes, oh, we're going to go here now. And, so it's really being aware and then
Mhm.
just using what I have. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, yeah.
It's fascinating because, like we've talked about, we don't have the same condition at all, but it's so relatable in the way that, like, our bodies aren't really telling us, like mine is like spasming out and I'm not really noticing it until it's like screaming at me, or, it'll start yelling at me if I've been in a position for too long and haven't paid attention because of my ADHD and I've been hyper focused on something. But it's interesting how, like, you use the term umbrella, like, all these different conditions are so broad and affect people so differently, but it's also so relatable, even though it's not the same cause. Like yours is joints and flexibility in that way, but we experience some of the same pain and everything, so it's very weird, but relatable.
Very, very relatable.
Mm-hmm. So your pieces often feel both delicate and intense, emotionally charged, and fine detailed. Can you walk us through your process from idea to finish?
Yeah. And thank you. That's a really, great way of mentioning my work. Yeah, I actually have to see a piece finished in my head before I can start it.
Wow.
Yes. Um, I I never really talked about it until one day, just having a conversation with a friend of mine after he and I had had a few drinks, actually, to be honest with you, and I felt a little bit loose, and I was like, hey, we were talking about my artwork, and I had said, this is going to sound weird, but I have to see a piece finished in my head before I can start it. And he goes, no, that doesn't sound weird at all. And he's not an artist at all.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's times where I will like just kind of randomly kind of free sketch or whatever and see what comes out. But I have to see at least the composition in my head finished before I can even start the actual rough sketch ideas. That's where
That
that's.
that's
Um,
so interesting.
yeah, it is. And I've tried to, force it. when I was in school, we didn't have a choice. We had to force it. And whenever I've had to force certain things, there's a weird disconnect with the project.
Mm.
And it doesn't always work out. But then I think I've kind of trained my brain to really kind of tune in though, and I will kind of make a collage in my head slowly, piece it together, and then I'll just and it's usually when I'm doing something like mundane, of course, and then all of a sudden it's in my head like fire.
Mm.
And then sometimes it instantly is in my head. I'm given a project and boom, there it is, like that Nate Bargatze poster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the email, I accepted the offer, blah blah blah, and then 2 minutes later, all of a sudden I saw that derpy owl with the big dumb eyes in my head, and then I just drew it. I just drew it on a piece of lined paper. So that's what happens is I have to see it finished. Then I go to rough sketches where I'm trying to translate from my head to the paper. And as an artist, doesn't always get there, but gets close.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I finish out kind of the line work. And then I take that line work. If it's just a small sketch, then I'll scan it, blow it up, print it out, and then transfer that onto Arch's cold pressed watercolor paper with a graphite pencil. I go in and usually do the line work very softly with a 0.5 fine point drafting pencil, which difficult to come by that lead, and you stab yourself frequently and it breaks frequently. But for some reason, that's the thing that works for me. I do a light grayscale of the piece in pencil. Then that's when I start, once a black and white kind of grayscale piece is done, then I go in with micron ink pen, again, super, super fine point. And then once I go in with like the basic outlines, I then start adding watercolor. And then it's just a combo of however it works. I'll use sometimes watercolor pencils in there to add a little bit of color. And then it's a process back and forth between that pen, some more graphite, and then I just build the image up. It's very intuitive. It's a process that I've tried in the past to teach, and I can't, because each piece is different. Mm-hmm. And I just make it work how it works.
Yeah. That's incredible. I feel like as an artist, oftentimes, like I see the image in my head, but I see very, very like hyper realistic, and I'm not good at that. So I get frustrated with my art because I'm like, it's not looking how I want it to. But I feel like you have such a clear picture and it translates so well. And it's just so detailed and like I said, delicate, but also like powerful. It's beautiful. So I absolutely love your work.
Thank you. I was just going to say, this is the tricky thing, though. I totally get what you mean, because I see my images moving. I forgot
Really?
I left that out. Yeah, probably 9 times out of 10, not all the time, but a lot of times the images are moving.
That's so interesting.
In the 3D. Yeah. So I heard that people that work in animation sometimes do that. But for me, yeah.
I was going to ask, like, have you ever thought of animating like a full scene?
I have thought about it. When I was in school, I definitely looked into it, and then I realized it wasn't really for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting how it comes up in your head, though. That's super cool.
Yeah.
As a freelance artist, how do you balance running a business with the unpredictability of the chronic illness? I know you just said you started, speaking up and everything, but how do you find a balance with the actual business side of it?
I'm working on that currently, because the balance has been tough. I'm not going to lie. Because it takes so much, because I have to take so many frequent breaks, and because some days it's just not going to work for me. It's difficult because sometimes I feel like I have to, and sometimes this is the case, I have to choose between creating or putting my time and effort towards the online aspect in the building the business portion of it. So for that, I'm still practicing the process of it. But again, it's just really being aware of what is working and what isn't working in the moment.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely.
I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's and then just being vocal with other people and being vocal with myself, and then not getting down on myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard not to do, but you got to push through and do it. And it's a process learning how to balance these things. I first obviously found your art through Mike Cannon, which was incredible. And then I know you created art for Nate Bargatze and another very big person that I don't know if I can mention yet.
Yeah, I think it's under wraps for right now.
Okay, under wraps right now. But what role has comedy played in your life, especially as someone dealing with chronic pain, and has humor influenced your art style or the way you tell stories visually?
I would say humor hasn't had the chance to really influence my art too much. I've, you know, yeah, I usually actually I would say my condition has influenced my art more because I
Mhm.
do a lot of pieces that incorporate anatomy, things like connective tissue, things like that. But when it comes to comedy, it has just really helped me cope.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've run into this that it's so easy, like not everybody it falls on very well because especially people that don't have a disability, they're like, what are you taught? Like, what? Like I
Yeah.
recently joked with a physician and I had said, yeah, I took my Bargatze money, injected it into my hips. And she goes, oh, that's sad. That's so sad. I'm so sorry. And I just was like, I am fine. I said it because I was proud. I
Mhm.
was
Absolutely.
proud of making the money to get medical treatment.
Mhm.
My insurance wasn't going to pay for it.
Wow.
So, you know, so I was proud, but also I found it really funny.
Mhm.
And so it's one of those things is like being able to joke about that. Not and making sure though also I'm not putting myself down at the same time.
Yes.
And being a comedy fan, I've kind of just learned that,
Mhm.
and it's just being able to laugh. My favorite moments in life I are laughing. Since I can remember, I have actually since I was a child, and I think my dad was watching a stand-up comedy special on HBO,
Wow.
and I
Yeah.
remembered it then. So I've always been a person that just really loves to laugh.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just really helped me, especially at the times when I have the choice between having a horrible reaction or to just be like, heh,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, in those moments, which way do I want to go? And I'm very blessed the fact that my brain is wired to just make a joke about it. And yes,
Yeah.
I think it's a coping mechanism. I've been told that dark humor, especially, is people's way of coping through and deflecting. But if that's the worst thing that I'm going to do to cope and deflect, then bring it on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was gonna say, which is funny you mentioned it, I feel like a lot of people that I've met who have chronic illness and disability and everything have this sense of dark humor because it's like, what are we gonna do? Sit around and cry all day? I do that sometimes too.
Yeah,
But
I
that being said, sometimes you just have to laugh about it because like what else are you gonna do? It's part of life and you have to embrace it and find the funny in it because if not, we would be miserable all the time.
I know, right? Right. I mean, and I do know some people that they latch onto that and they make them miserable their identity. And
Mhm.
that's their journey. That's how they're choosing to. But for me, it's I've and it's also made other people around me, it's broken the ice and made them less uncomfortable and made them laugh at the situation too and see that, oh, otherwise they might just be focused on my friend or my significant other is struggling and there's nothing I can do to help it. That's my control. If if anything else, I might not have control of what my body wants to do that day, but I have control of like how I'm going to face it.
I
And
love that attitude. I love that. That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. And of course, there's those days, a lot of those days where it's, I'm going to, but, and I think that's where like, where years ago I became a, Mike Cannon fan, because that was the comedian we met through, is because I remember him telling a story about his dad throwing a Christmas tree out the family's front door when he was a child. There's so many people that would be like, that is horrific, that is traumatic. And he found a way of taking this horrible, horrible thing and twisting and retelling it in such a way that it made me double over in laughter. And it's, again, these things are tragic, but they can be approached in a way where it's funny. I don't know.
Absolutely. And it can be healing too, I think,
I
hearing
think
jokes
so
about
too.
this stuff. And like, when I listen to comedians, even if they don't have disabilities necessarily, but talking about mental health and depression and everything, bringing light to those dark subjects feels so good because it feels so all encompassing sometimes. So to have those light moments is absolutely incredible. More questions, and then I know we have to go. What advice would you give to other disabled or chronically ill artists trying to build a creative career?
I would say don't do it on anybody else's terms. Do it on your terms.
I like that.
Figure out what works for you. Just what might work. And even in the disability community, what might help one artist with maybe even the same situation, like the same diagnosis, it might not be the same workflow that you can do. But don't let that stop you, from just pursuing what you want. And again, you would be amazed how many people actually are understanding and want to help. You just have to mention it. You just have to bring it up. And not everybody's going to understand, but for every one person that doesn't understand, there's probably 10 that do.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything you would want people to know about HEDS, chronic pain, or disabilities in general?
As far as EDS goes, I would say that, it's still a process and they're still figuring out, certain blood tests to do it. So that's something just to be aware of, that, and it is considered one of those illnesses where it is invisible for a lot of people. So just because somebody might at face value look quote unquote healthy, doesn't mean that they're not struggling or not in pain that day. So just have a heart.
Absolutely. Great
Yeah.
advice. Yeah, that applies for sure with any invisible illness. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And then finally, where can people find your work and how can they follow you and support you directly?
Awesome. Yeah. I find my work mostly on Instagram, ashmcreations.com or at instagram.com. And through there, I have my Shopify and my personal contact because I'm very approachable. I'm open to direct messaging. I'm open to emails, open to texts, everything. So that's pretty much the source for right now to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I've had a great time guest hosting with Ash today. If you're looking to find our work, you can check me out on brianaraucci.com or on Instagram at Briana Raucci. You can find Ash on Instagram at Ash_M_creations. Definitely go explore her portfolio, check out her available work, and support her as she continues creating. Be sure to check out my blog for a companion post about this episode and more reflections on disability, creativity, chronic pain, and of course, the healing power of color. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Able Voices is a production of the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berkeley Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.